Thank you. Thank you very much for joining me. I've been following you for the last few years, and I love everything you do, everything you're writing about. I guess you don't know much about me either, so
Yeah,
I'll
I
just
do. Right. Yeah.
so I'll just tell you. So I'm a lawyer. I've been a commercial and corporate lawyer for the last 10 years, working predominantly with tech companies. And about almost 4 years ago, started a practice focused exclusively on crypto and blockchain legal and regulatory compliance,
Cool.
on
In
a
in
global
Israel, you
scale.
work clients everywhere.
I live in Israel, but we service clients all over the world. We do global regulatory compliance. So we advise on, the regulatory frameworks that apply to blockchain in every jurisdiction. So it's kind of unique and, definitely like a different type of law firm, which is why everything you're doing at Jayaram just like really caught my eye. Like I love how creative you guys are. We started rebranding our website recently, I told them I want you to draw on ideas from here, just because like I love how different it is. Like I hate the old
Yeah.
like study law firm style. And like when I went to my first crypto conference to speak as a few years ago in Miami, I had just left Big Law, and I came wearing like my lawyer shoes and like fancy slacks. And like two NFT clients that were with me said, like, dude, you can't go on stage like that. Let's take you shopping. You got me a pair of like ripped jeans and Jordan ones, and
Yeah. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. The
okay, this is
uniform.
the new you. And then I came home, and my wife is like, who are you, man? And like I bought an
Yeah.
iPhone, and she was like, whoa, what's going on
Ah.
there? So yeah, so I'm definitely trying to create something different, and definitely been very inspired by like all the creative work that you guys do. But I don't know enough about it, and I don't know enough about you. And kind of one of the nice things I like about having this platform and having a podcast where you interview people is like I have the opportunity to have conversations with people that I just find generally interesting and intriguing. So
Yeah, for
um,
sure. Yeah.
I'm very eager to hear more about you and how you started Jayaram and everything that you guys are doing now and everything you have planned for the future. And yeah, thanks for joining me. Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzi Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game.
Yeah. No, it's great to be here. I mean, do you want me to start? You want me to say something about like how we got started?
Yeah, you know what? I would, first of all, I'd just like to introduce you to my audience.
Yeah. Why we
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Vivek Jayaram. Tell me if I mispronounced that. I'm sorry.
No, it's actually
Vivek.
it's the way. Yeah, Vivek, and it's Jayaram. But you have the right. I think you have the wrong.
Vivek Jayaram.
Yeah, I think you got the last name right.
Founding partner.
Yeah, founder. Yeah.
Founder of Jayaram Law, which is the coolest law firm you will ever come across, and the best legal content creator out there. And I'm sure many other cool things that I don't yet know about. Please tell me a little bit about your background, how, where you grew up, how you got, involved in creative law, entertainment law.
Yeah.
What exactly it is that you guys do at Jayaram now, how you started Jayaram, just kind of your deep dive as much as possible.
Yeah, sure. So, well, thank you, Yitzi, for having me. I appreciate it. Grateful to be on here today, and also understand that it's Israel Memorial Day, and so would like to also just acknowledge that for a moment as obviously a very
thank you
important moment and a deeply personal moment for you too. So, so with that, I guess I'll just tell you, I'm South Indian. I was born in the U.S., but my parents came over in the late '60s from Bangalore, India, which for most of my childhood was a quiet, green garden city kind of town, and now, as you may know, is like a little bit of like the technology, one of the technology capitals of Asia. And so it's gone through a lot of growth over the last, since I've been around a lot, but certainly the last 25 years or so. So I grew up in Chicago, which is where they immigrated to, and my dad had gotten a job there, and so my mom applied to. She was the only woman in her graduating class of medical school in India, but she applied to every residency program in Chicago and ended up getting one at Grant Hospital up in Lincoln Park. And so I was born, right around there, and grew up there. And so I lived in Chicago until I was 18. Ended up going to University of Wisconsin for my undergraduate studies. And I would say most of my youth, I was like really involved, like super passionate about two things, I guess, which would be like, sports and music would be like kind of two things. So on the sports side,
do you play anything?
Yeah, I mean,
well, I see the guitar in the background.
There's a guitar here, but I on the sports side, I grew up in Chicago. Like I was born in 1978. I'm 46, so like I was
during the Bulls' peak.
Yeah, I was 12 years old when the Bulls won their first championship, and I was 18 when they won at 19 when they won their sixth.
Wow.
So like my entire coming of age was really informed a lot by Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, John Paxson, Bill Cartwright, Phil Jackson, like the whole team, right? So that was like a big part of my childhood, and watching those games with my parents and my siblings and my grandparents who at various points were living with us, which is very common in South Indian families. And so that was one side of the aisle. And I also played sports, and I did play a little bit of basketball, but my sport really was tennis, that I played a lot and played through high school, even played in college a little bit. So, I mean, that's, kind of the sports side. I also, started playing instruments at a pretty young age. I know my mom got me involved. I never liked piano initially, although I regret that. I wish I learned it back then, which is trying to, but I ended up starting on trumpet, played that for a couple of years. I think by fifth grade, I had grown a little tired of that. Started listening to a little rock and roll, maybe my sister's new wave kind of
good
stuff.
Man.
Yeah. And so I started playing a little drums, but it was really in like fifth, sixth grade where I started taking guitar lessons. And, one thing I always thought, it kind of, held me back with piano and trumpet was that you go to these lessons and like you start with Do Re Mi or Mary Had a Little Lamb or something like that. And when I went to my very first guitar lesson, it was at a place called Naperville Music outside Chicago. I forget the teacher's name, but he, first of all, just looked super cool. Had super long hair, was wearing a black leather jacket, smelled like cigarettes, like, he had the whole thing. And he's just like, what kind of music do you like? And so like, I tried to name like whatever rock and roll acts I knew. And all he did was like, teach me the songs I love. And I was like, wow, that's cool. This is cool. This is fun. This is fun.
This is like a Jack Black and School of Rock kind of thing.
Yeah. So that just kind of started my love affair with music. And, that was fifth, sixth grade. And then in seventh grade, I'll never forget, I was in a drama class, and we had to, as one of the projects, we had to lip sync to a song. I did LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out. And my neighbor, Cindy Wong, Cindy, if you're out there, if you're hearing this, she got up there, and this was seventh grade. So this was 1991-ish to like right around there. And her older sister was in college. And so she always was like bringing home kind of cooler tapes than like what, I maybe had access to or whatever. So she gets up there and she puts on a blonde wig. She's an Asian woman, so she had black hair, but she put on a blonde wig and had some, probably jeans like the ones your buddies made you buy, the ripped ones. And she gets up there and she sings this just unbelievable song, which was actually It Smells Like Teen Spirit. And that was the first time I heard that. Fell super in love with Nirvana and basically everything else alternative. And for the first time in my life, I had music that I felt like was my own rather than just like listening to the new wave 80s stuff, which I still love, but like that was really more my sister's music. So it was like, 6 years older than me. So that really like started a love affair with like all things alternative, like from music to like, movies and, independent film and maybe independent writers and, independent emerging visual artists, like all that kind of stuff. It just sort of opened my mind to this world of like, people making things outside the mainstream, which was, as a 14-year-old, we were pretty impressionable. It was can be pretty impactful. So I kind of went off to college at the University of Wisconsin with like these two sides of me that I was deeply passionate about, sports and music. And that is basically who I am today too, like 30 years later. But when I got
to give me an idea of your musical journey, like what do you listen to nowadays?
Gosh, I listen to all kinds of things. I mean, I think the three, like, it really isn't a lot. I mean, a lot of hip hop. I mean, I love Kendrick Lamar is great. I've always listened to a lot of like indie rock. So I'm actually going tonight to see Wilco, which is a band from also
I know.
my youth in Chicago. Going to see them, and Waxahachie is opening up for them, and she's a great young songwriter
Awesome.
from Mississippi, I believe, or Alabama. So yeah, I mean, and I'm probably on any given week, I'm listening to 20, 30 hours of jazz because I love jazz, and I have a lot of vinyl, and I usually spend my evenings with the kids and stuff with that kind of on in the background. So those are kind of the three areas. I'd say hip hop, indie rock, and jazz would be the kind of three things that we listen to the most. But when I got to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I kind of knew I wanted to get into the humanities just in terms of like what I wanted to study. And so I love to read. I really love to read. And so I became an English major, and I knew I had to add a double major because even my parents told me you're never going to get a job with an English degree. So I said, all right. And I ended up taking a couple courses and ended up sort of having a double major in this area. It was basically called behavioral science, but it really was very multidisciplinary. And it really was my junior year. I went to the career office for the very first time. And at the time, I was writing sports articles for the school newspaper, and I had been doing it for a couple of years, so I was getting some pretty good gigs. Like I got to cover some of the basketball games, some of our football games, which was like the biggest news on campus, And I said, hey, she's like, what do you think you want to do? I'm like, well, I'm really enjoying this, like writing for newspapers. Like maybe I could go be a journalist. And so she plopped down this giant book of like career options for journalists or whatever. And, because we had the internet, but we still weren't looking for jobs. This is 1998. We weren't looking for jobs, really on the internet. So I remember looking, and she's like, yeah, what's your goal? I'm like, well, I'd love to write for the New York Times. She's like, well,
good luck with that, buddy.
Yeah. She's like, well, first you may need to move to a place like, Topeka, Kansas, and work your way up to a, second, third tier market. And then maybe, just maybe down the road, you may get a job in like one of the cities that you wanted to live in, which I'm sure I probably just said to her, like New York, LA, Chicago, something like that. Right. And so I was also staring down the barrel of a lot of loans. And I was looking at the, entry-level comp for like a journalist in the United States, which was very low. I actually remember her saying it was somewhere hovering around.
I'm not sure it's any different today.
Might not be, to be honest with you. So I quickly was like, wow. I'm like, well, what else do you suggest? And she's like, well, and I don't remember her name, but honestly,
you heard of law?
in this one meeting, she actually was able to crack a little bit of the code, I guess, which was like, she's like, well, what are the classes you really enjoyed? And the two that came to mind first was a criminal justice class and a political theory class. And she was not really focused on the content of those courses, but she looked at me, she goes, that is very interesting. I said, why? She goes, well, you've been going to school here for 3 years. You've almost completed 6 semesters. And the 2 courses you named are the only 2 courses you've had that were taught by law professors. And I said, oh, interesting. And it does make a little sense. Those 2 courses were like pretty substantive. There's a little bit of Socratic method going on there. I just felt they were very organized, not as esoteric as some of my other classes maybe, and just seemed like I left the lecture hall every week like feeling that I was learning something, So I'm like, okay, interesting. And so it was really based on that, Yitzi. I mean, and then she said to me, do you love to read and write? I said, absolutely. And she goes, well, that's all you do in law school. So, and I said, all right. So it was really a love for reading and writing that found my way into law school. And I almost immediately I applied to the same law school where I was at undergrad, University of Wisconsin Law School. I applied in the next couple months. I got in almost right away. And I was like, great, I guess I'm going to be here at the University of Wisconsin. And then in my senior year, I think I applied my senior year. And I think a few weeks after gaining entry, my parents came up to visit. And I was like, well, I need to get a grown-up apartment since I'm not going to be like an undergrad anymore. I'm going to be like a mature law student. So we're looking for an apartment, stuff like a little bit off campus. And it just dawned on me. I remember I was eating lunch with my mom, and I'm like, you know what, Mom? Like, I don't know if I want to stay here in this town for another 3 years. Love Madison, Wisconsin. It's a great place, very interesting place to go to school, and interesting place to live too. But it wasn't for me, and I really had a strong feeling that I wanted to move to New York. I mean, that was it. And I honestly didn't even really care what brought me to New York, and if law school was my gateway to get to New York City, then I was like, all right, I could do that. And so that is really the like very boring and not really planned path that took me to law school, you know? And so when I got there to New York in law school, I was living downtown, seeing a lot of shows, Bowery Ballroom, Knitting Factory, Tonic, yeah, Maxwell's in Hoboken. I mean, you name it. I was out several nights a week watching music, and I felt like that was
Making the
just
most of your New York time.
yeah. No, it was amazing. So I think I ended up going to Cardozo, which I thought had really great professors, made a lot of great friends. It was great. And when I got there, I just figured like, okay, well, I love the arts, and so maybe I want to be an entertainment lawyer. And it felt to me like half of our class wanted to do the same thing. And so I was like, okay, it seems like maybe I'm on the path here. Okay, this is good. And then as I often do, like just generally, I mean, I just said that, I bothered everybody in Manhattan that I could find online or just just during the course of my day to see if I could get some internship somewhere in the entertainment world. And I had interned at a law firm, both in high school and in college. It was basically the guy who would like run around the Chicago Loop filing like court filings for the litigators because we didn't have electronic filing. And
You were.
I was, yeah. So I was like basically like a bike messenger for lawyers, essentially. And I got that job because my dad, who was just a bit of a serial entrepreneur, I mean, nothing ever really stuck, but through his serial entrepreneurship, knew a lawyer who knew a lawyer who knew someone at a much larger firm downtown who they were kind of looking for this like very minimum wagey kind of run around the loop and file stuff kind of job. So I did that. And one of the lawyers there actually.
Your foot in the door.
Yeah, totally. One of the lawyers there knew that I was in law school, and I reached out to him. His name's Peter Strand, ended up becoming a very important mentor for me. And Peter introduced me to this guy, Tony Timpano, who at the time was working in-house at Sony Music. And I got an internship for my first summer, and it was unpaid. And one of the coolest things I remember is, I don't know if you know the songwriter M. Ward, but he did an album with Zooey Deschanel called She and Him, which is like become a kind of popular holiday album, but he's a great songwriter. And my first day at the office, he got off of a Greyhound, came into the office. They had a meeting. We were thinking about signing him, played his whole album on his acoustic guitar in the conference room while we were having lunch.
This is the career for me.
This is still like one of my favorite, like sort of singer-songwriter records. And we ended up signing him. That was my first day of work. But I'll say, like, the whole summer was not like that. I really loved the people I worked with, but like the legal part of it, you'd see, was like, I was looking at stacks and stacks of royalty statements, trying to like basically doing glorified data entry type stuff. And I don't know, something about the experience got
Isn't
me.
That like every internship position? Like you got to start from the bottom to move somewhere.
Probably, but I probably didn't know that or
recognize it at the time.
Okay. And I got to my second year and I'm like, I don't know if I want to be an entertainment lawyer. Honestly, that was great. That was fine. But I'm interested in a lot of things, So
okay.
I dove in. I was really into a few things like con law and Fed courts and the Innocence Project. And I started working a lot with a professor named Marcy Hamilton, who I'm still very grateful to say we do pro bono work with through her.
The Innocence Project spun out of Cardozo, didn't it?
It started at Cardozo from Professor Barry Scheck. Yep. So Marcy was doing two things. She was doing a lot of research at the intersection of religion and the law. She had then relatively recently won a fairly landmarkish kind of Supreme Court case called Bernie versus Flores. So the religious freedom cases. And she was also working on a lot of clergy abuse cases, an area that she's very passionate about even today. And we just got along really well. And I really enjoyed writing these amicus briefs with her. I had a leadership position on the moot court, board, and she really helped me with that stuff and figuring out how to, get the students ready for the moot court competitions and all that. We became pretty close. And by the third year, I figured I'd go to a law firm or something, but I really had my heart set on clerking for a federal judge. She had convinced me, and I had just sort of observed out there just in the world that this seemed to be like a really great way to get a lot of very, very valuable legal experience early in your career, And so I spent most of my first semester of my third year applying to what felt like every federal judge in the United States. And I had a very good interview in the Eastern District of New York with a district court judge in Brooklyn. And I remember coming back to Cardozo, walking through the doors, getting in the elevator, going up, and Marcy gets in the elevator on the second or third floor. And she goes, "Oh, where were you coming from?" And I said, "Oh, I just had," because I was in a suit, so she's probably wondering why I was in a suit. And I said, "I just had an interview with the judge. I won't name who it was, but I had a judge. She's still on the bench. Interview with this judge." And she goes, "Oh," and I said, "Yeah, really well. I think I might get this one." She's like, "Oh my God." She's like, "You need to apply to my co-clerk, Judge Jordan." So Marcy Hamilton clerked for Justice O'Connor with Burt Jordan on the U.S. Supreme Court back in the late 80s or the early 90s. So I said, "Okay, where is he?" And she goes, "Southern District of Florida." I said, "Wow, okay." I'm like, I've never
Wasn't
really
planning on going out.
never been to Miami.
Wow.
Happy to try. People forget and people don't really realize 25 years ago, living in America and saying you've never been to Miami was not that unusual of a thing. It was a small retirement and vacation town. That's really all that was here. Not a lot of industry and things like that. And so I came down for the interview, and I got an offer almost like on the spot. So I took it.
Weather's good. You got a job.
Yeah, that's what you got to do. And so I'm like, all right, Miami, here I come. And so that was in 2004, I suppose, 4 or 5, right around there. And I moved down here. Are
you still there?
And I'm still here. So when I actually got the offer to clerk, the judge, it was unusual back then, but it's much more common now. He didn't want the clerks to come directly sort of, in right from law school. He wanted them to get some work experience. And I had been interviewing at some firms. So long story short, I ended up working at Greenberg Traurig, big law firm,
sure,
in Miami, sort of on both sides of that clerkship. And it was great. I mean, the clerkship, just 1 second on that, best legal job I've ever had, best job I've ever had, unbelievable. The learning is really unparalleled. Like to even say that, it's worth a couple years in practice, I don't even feel that kind of doesn't really fully describe the sort of like the value of it.
It's the volume and the caliber of the work. What is it?
Yeah, I mean, imagine if you're a litigator, right? You spend your day trying to figure out how to convince a judge to do something.
And here you get an opportunity to go into the judge's mind. You
are literally part of the process, like in a very, 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 very intimate part of the process, right? I mean, and any clerk will tell you this. I mean, especially in the back half of your clerkship, I mean, you're drafting the opinions, and many times
judges signing off.
Yeah, right. So, so that and that'll play. I think that plays pretty prominently for me throughout my career, is that experience I had with Judge Jordan. And when I was at Greenberg, it was great. I was doing some IP litigation, commercial litigation. But you'd see after a few years, suiting up every day and sort of being in that culture and environment, it just wasn't for me. It just wasn't for me.
You're talking to an ex-big law guy, so I can appreciate.
Yeah, it just wasn't for me.
It was an invaluable experience, but it's not for me.
Exactly. That's it. And so from a cultural standpoint, everything else. And so I kind of went back to square one. And to be honest with you, I was a little lost. Extremely lost, and probably close to sort of hitting a bottom, honestly.
You made a decision that you were leaving Big Law without having a new thing to do?
Yeah. So what ended up happening was
just like, I can't handle this anymore. I got to get out of here.
Yeah. So I think the last 2 straws were, I brought in one relatively big and then one relatively small matter to the firm. And my bonus that year was, I think, $1,000. So I was like, all right, I just made the firm close to 600,000, and I got $1,000. So I didn't, I didn't.
Literally my story, almost to a T.
So I was like, okay, interesting. And so I came home, and I met my now wife midway through my clerkship. So we were dating. I can't remember if we were already living together or not. I don't think we were, but I remember coming over to her place after work one day. I'm like, I'm out of here. This is, I can't do this anymore. And I was also feeling a little bit of confidence from the fact that I had generated some business. I was like, okay, I think I can do this on my own. And honestly, we had a very real conversation, and it was kind of like, she's also like just a remarkable human being who is very.
What's her name?
Carolina, as she's the CEO of the Elevate Prize Foundation, been a CEO her entire life. The only person I know who's actually been a career-long CEO, first of an organization of one, then an organization of 10, then it continued, much bigger. So, she is also somebody who like tends to lean on, values more than money. And so she was like, yeah, like if this is how you're feeling and this feels right, and this is like, you feel it's the right thing to do, go for it. And I only really I was 30 years old. I mean, I really didn't have much maturity or experience. And so the only thing I could muster in terms of like, what is it I'm going to do is I just want to work with like the most creative people I could find. That was it. Right. And I think that came from Yitzi, spending my first 25 or so years of life with a lot of creative people, like all my friends and like just people in my community playing music, going out to see music, all this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden I get to Big Law and I'm spending all my time basically in the office and, with just a whole different kind of person. Right. And it just, to me, I was just like, this is not the life worth living. Right. I mean, there's got to be something else out there. So it was really about two things. Not just, if I say I want to, build a creative law firm, I want to work with creative people, I think people immediately go to, oh yeah, okay, he wants to be an entertainment lawyer and work for like those people making movies, people making, paintings and music, maybe stuff like that. And that was certainly part of it, right? But I actually was also inspired at the time, I remember this is 2009, by this small cadre of firms like Wilson Sonsini and Fenwick and Cooley, who were kind of new left of center firms back then, 15, 18 years ago, where now they're just, part of the Big Law machine, I feel like. But back then they were like big, but they were like, had this focus on innovation and technology, which I thought was also, things I was very passionate about, like I had Prodigy dial-up connection when I was 13 that I would be on every day, first person on my block, back in the early 90s. Like I've always enjoyed sort of internet culture as well. So I definitely didn't want to be an entertainment lawyer. I had a very specific view of what that was, and that's not what I wanted to be. But I did want to be somebody who worked with really creative people, right? And so, yes, I wanted to see if I could find people in fashion and in the arts and in, whatever, but I also wanted to work with people in technology and elsewhere who were maybe also really, really deeply interested in creating things that moved culture, right? A lot of people graduate law school and become an M&A lawyer, become, litigator, whatever, maybe more interested in moving money. And I think if there was one way I could describe myself as being slightly different, it was like I was most interested in working with people who were moving culture rather than people moving money. That was just sort of how that's what I always thought was just interesting, And so that's how Jayaram was really, born, right from that idea. And the second,
that's how the idea was born. How is Jayaram actually born?
Yeah,
Jayaram. You don't go from like, okay, I want to work with really creative people to
want to work with creative
where you are today.
clients, but the other part of it, I also want to find all the lawyers like me, and I want to bring them in, right, to help like service this stuff with a very artist, and I guess today you would say artist founder, kind of founder forward, artist forward kind of like spirit, right? But yeah, how do you do that, right? How do you just do that, right? And so here's the unsexy parts of starting Jayaram Law, right? I mean, I think I had a hair under like 20 grand that I had been able to save up over a couple of years of Big Law. And I called on my former guitarist to help me build my website and logo. He also did my wedding invitation in the same year. Thank you, Greg. Very, 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 very grateful for that. Yeah, playing all those Smashing Pumpkins covers together in high school really, really brought some value later on. But I did two things really in the first week that I hung my shingle. I mean, I found.
When was this? When did you hang your shingle?
2009. So in say August 2009, I reached out to another one of those lawyers that I worked with when I was an intern, right? And that lawyer I actually reached out to two lawyers, both of whom had very public and famous separations from the big law firm that I was the court runner for or whatever. And they had both started their own sort of solo shops. One of them was doing he was an antitrust expert, one of the top ones in Chicago, but it's very hard to be a solo antitrust lawyer. So what did he do? He was also a divorce lawyer. That's right. Half antitrust, half divorce. I've never seen anything like it. He was busy and he's just like, listen, you want to help me write some briefs on the antitrust cases? I could use some help with that. All right, great. So I did a little bit of work there. Then over here, I had another the other lawyer was handling a major patent case, patent, trade secrets, a little bit of trademark, like all kinds of stuff. And he needed help. And when I reached out to him, he also said, yeah, come to my office, like, let's help. So I had those two things in the first like 10 days, and they were keeping me busy. And then about 10 days in, I got a call from, I sent out the typical mass email, hey, I'm starting a law firm. I got a call from somebody who received that forward of that email, and it ended up being my first real client. And it's a bit of a full circle moment because after we had that venture, we lost touch with each other. But about a year and a half ago, he called me on his new venture, which is FitGrid. And that same founder,
Wow.
Antieto Ituk, was really my first client with a company he had called Tabula Digita, which later rebranded to Dimension U. And this was an educational video game company that he built and got into the two biggest school districts in the U.S. And the company kind of took some different turns, and I stopped working with them when they had some big sort of strategic changes and made some moves sort of to scale down rather than scaling up. And then that was it, man. Like, yes, you get a couple of those things, and then you're busy. And then so this was also like I said, 2009 in Chicago, and back then I left out a quick fact that I should say. So when I came home and told my wife that I wanted to start this thing, which was in Miami, she was like, "Well, okay, like, we're just doing that here?" And I said, that was the other part of it. I was like, well, no, Miami's small. I don't really have a huge network here. I just got here a couple of years ago. Let's go back to New York. Like, that's the center of the world, the universe. Like, that's where we can really build, I think, a thriving practice. And you could also build like a very thriving career. And she very smartly said to me, well, two things. She goes, one, I'm not moving anywhere till we're married. So I took care of that. And then she said, two, why don't we move to Chicago? Because that's where your family is, and if we're going to have kids, that's where we should be. So, this was 2009, Chicago, Groupon and Grubhub had just had some exits. It was a very interesting place to be in terms of the tech world. Looking back, I didn't know that at the time. And I got very involved in the 1871, which is a tech incubator there, accelerator, started by the Pritzkers in connection with Northwestern University and some others. And that was really it, man. We were really kind of off and running. And I spent all my time, free time that I had, out at, all my friends, like art exhibitions and going to see shows and going to the museums and all kinds of different things. My wife was also working for Chicago Artists Coalition. So like, we were just very.
Let me pause you 1 second.
Yeah.
What kind of work were you doing?
So
like, was it IP work? Was it M&A work? Was it litigation?
I was doing primarily litigation, and I was doing a little bit of trademark prosecution. So finding clients who needed to sort of, I was litigating trademark cases. So I'm like, all right, I can figure out how to like file some, right? So I was doing some of that. The trademark work led a little bit to me then starting to do a little bit of transaction.
Litigating trademark work means like representing IP owners for suing people for infringement.
Right. So that's on the litigation side would be handling the infringement, and then the prosecution side, helping them get trademarks.
Okay.
Right? So doing that. And 2011, I hired really my first full-time associate. It was Johanna Hyman. That was like two years or so in. And, I always say this, I ended up moving back to Miami just a couple years later, 2014, 15. We were missing it. We loved it. And when I moved back here, 10 years ago, we had 4 lawyers, I think. I added somebody in New York because I had a lot of clients in New York in 2016. And I'll say it's, between 2009 and 2019, I call that like Jayaram sort of V1, right? That was like the version 1. And it was great, but we went into the pandemic with I think we had 7 people. And we were representing people in fashion. I had a bunch of early stage technology companies. We had never sold any of those tech companies to anybody, never sold any of these fashion companies to anybody. Was working with a few artists, 1 or 2 of whom were really blowing up a little bit, we're blowing up. And then sort of mixed bag of other clients. But that was really it. And I would say at that point, going into the pandemic, oh boy, I'd say we had a 85% litigation team practice, 90%, and say 10%, 15% transactional and non-litigation. And everything changed for us in the pandemic. In the first, I would say, 18 months or so.
How's that?
And so in those first 18 months, we had some organic things happening, which were really fun. Had two of my fashion brands, one get acquired and the other one took a huge, majority investment from major fashion houses. And because they were growing and they were hot and they were, and they both still are. And so that, got us a lot more work, but then also kind of exposed us to a whole new world of people and possibilities. Two of the tech companies that I had been representing from the very beginning, 2010, believe it or not. So for 10 years, we sold them to Goldman Sachs within the first 6 months of the pandemic. In pretty good deals, and those deals led to more deals because those founders formed funds, and that used us for everything and continue to use us for everything. And as that was happening, there was something else happening that was also very unique. I mentioned to you that I was a little bit of an electronics tinkerer, just really liked the internet and internet culture. And so I found a way to represent blockchain and AI startups even before the pandemic, even though nobody was funding those things. And even though none of those startups had any money, we helped them where we could. Hey, I need a licensing agreement here. Hey, we needed to actually protect our company. So can you file a trademark for us? Or, hey, we're taking $100,000 of money and someone actually thought our bizarre blockchain idea was worth something. So, whatever. So we had some fluency in that area. And so when the pandemic came, I had a friend, she wasn't even a client, I don't think by then, who was running a art gallery up in Palm Beach. And she told me that she was going to close down her art gallery to go into business with one of her artists to create digital art. And I said, okay, cool. And so we helped set them up with a company and all the documents and all that. And she mentioned that this was going to be art that was going to be distributed on chain, right? And which we were calling non-fungible tokens, NFTs back then, still are, right? And so she launches this NFT project called the Bungie Project, and that at the time, right, not forever, but for a time, and when it did launch early in the pandemic, about a year in, it was the highest grossing NFT project in history up to that point, right? And so that led us to, we attracted a lot more sort of digital creators, but what also happened there, Yitzi, was a bunch of the big brands started to take notice that we were working in this area and at this intersection of technology, art, and sort of the law. And they were interested in working with us on some of these types of things too. So some of the really bigger big public companies, right, that are out there. And so that really helped us grow. And I would say by the end of 2022, we were almost at the same size that we are now, which is about 35 people or so. So wow. there was a time in 2022 for the whole year, every Monday we'd come in and we had new people started, so it was an exciting time. And so that's kind of where the practice is now today. We're about 35 people. We got 3 groups. We do a lot of litigation. And I'd say 80% of the litigation is probably, or 75% of the litigation is soft IP litigation, copyright and trademark litigation. I'd say the rest of it is fraud and, M&A deal gone bad and stuff like that. We've got an IP group team that we do everything sort of full service, copyright, trademark, trade secrets, patent, counseling, enforcement, litigation, kind of all of that. And on the transactional side, really working mainly in 2 areas, which is helping startups get funded, a lot of financing deals, and then helping them exit through M&A. We do other things too, but that's really what the corporate team does. And yeah, man, we love it. And a couple of the things we did during go ahead.
You make it sound like you just have a law firm, but I know that it's much more than that because I see the kind of stuff that you guys do. You also seem to have a lot of fun and do a lot of really cool shit at the same time. Your offices don't look like offices. You're posting way too much about art galleries in your office and creative workshops than most law firms do. So tell me a little bit about that side. It seems like you're lawyering and having a good time and creating stuff at the same time.
Sure. Listen, we don't even call ourselves a law firm. We're just a company, right? I feel when you use certain terms, unfortunately, the society sort of really loves to box you in, right, and define you. And from the very beginning, I think this was in one of the early emails that I'd even sent to my guitarist friend, web designer, was like, you know, I didn't know a lot back then, but I made a few decisions that I'm very grateful for, you know, which is never wanted to be like any other law firm. In fact, it was a very intentional move to just kind of blissfully ignore the entire legal industry. No conferences, no ABA summits, no like, you know, bar association events and stuff like that. It was mainly like, let's just create the dopest company we can create. And if we're inspired by companies like Apple or Chess Records or like, you know, Margiela or whoever, let's just be inspired by them. And let's run as fast and hard as we can in the direction that feels right to us. Right. And, you know, 15 years ago, you'd see, you know, I was walking into meetings with hoodies and sneakers and, you know,
Good man.
and people really looked at me weird. And I got a lot of shit from other lawyers, from potential clients, probably even from like other people in the legal community. But like,
now they look at you with respect.
You know, I really don't know. But I think the important thing is I try not to pay attention.
It doesn't, right? It doesn't really matter. I want to touch on something that it has on your website, which I think is an amazing thing, and even more amazing that it exists on your website and that you feel the need to put it there.
Yeah.
You have, and I'm sure, I don't think I've ever seen any other law firm in any field have this ever. You have here your mission and your purpose. Your mission is not to make shit tons of cash. It's not to win, to close deals for our clients, and it's not to win cases for our clients. Your mission is to enable original ideas. That's incredible. And your purpose is to create something unique and everlasting together. These are both things that I very, very much resonate with. As you know, a legal entrepreneur, you know, on my own journey, starting something which I think is different. I'm, you know, incredibly inspired by both of these, your mission and your purpose. Thank you for thinking out of the box that way and for sharing it with the world. What drove you to put that on your website? And I just imagine you sitting with your team in you know, with a whiteboard in front of you and like scribbling on the board, like, this is our mission. Like,
Yeah.
How did you get there?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, listen, every great company's got mission, vision, values, right? And so like, I've always been very, you know, serious about having that, you know, front and center for us. And this was a newer iteration from 3 years ago. I think our original tagline, which we still use all the time, is Lawyers for Innovators. But this idea of enable original ideas, I mean, that gets to the core of what we do, right? Yes, we practice law, but we also find, you know, JV partners for our clients. We find investors for our clients. We find venues for clients who want to have a pop-up show or an exhibition or a, you know, fashion conference or a whatever it is, right? If you know, this has literally happened. If a major fashion brand is having supply chain issues, we don't just look at it from a legal perspective. We look at our network to see, okay,
how can we help you solve this?
Can we help solve this?
I feel like you're
right. And so the enable original ideas came from this idea that what we really want at the end of the day, and I bet you know, maybe, yeah, is when someone wakes up and they say, I have a really interesting idea. I want them to think, well, we got to call Jayaram, right? It kind of doesn't matter if that's an art idea or like a pharmaceutical idea or like an aviation idea, right? I mean, certain industries tend to know us more than others, but I think the main equalizer or commonality among all of our client types and client groups and just clients is this desire to make something original and new and innovative. And I think we're a good partner for that. You know, and so that's where the mission comes from. The purpose is also like deeply important and something I deeply believe in, which is, you know, the thing that drove me more than anything else to do this was this unfortunate fact that I do believe in our industry and oftentimes in big law specifically, you're really asked to like conceal who you are and conceal your real personality. And so this idea of authenticity, which, is probably overused these days, but it's really important, right? And so we really promote that idea of being real and being yourself. And I think the only way you can really reach this like place of peace and joy is to really be peaceful and joyous in your own skin and your own self. And so the idea being, if we can put together a team of people that all come to the table with that level of openness and a desire to be their true selves, right? That is really where the magic is, because together you can really create something everlasting and deeply, deeply meaningful, right? With clients, with each other, but ultimately really like for ourselves, right? And so that idea of being connected in this way, which I find, I do a lot of yoga and then meditation, stuff like that. And like I grew up, I grew up Hindu. I consider myself Hindu. Is very, central to really everything that we do. And I think that's why like our North Star is like very clear, I think, to a lot of people. And, that's why it also sometimes pains me when I see like these executive orders and things coming down, and I'm like seeing a lot of law firms are responding to it. I think it's oftentimes because maybe you're not so clear in your mission, vision, and values, right, and stuff like that. So that's like, that's like a little bit of what we do. And then you mentioned the offices and stuff, and I think they're just extensions of this, right? So like, both in New York,
It's a
and
physical expression of everything
exactly
that's going through
in these spaces we have
your
in New York
hearts and your minds.
right. These spaces in New York and Miami are really places where we just gather our community. And of course we want ROI out of all these events we do and all these activations and stuff, but we're really focused on really just like
It starts from passion.
Exactly. Right.
I love it.
Yeah.
I really love it. I every time you put a post, I like send a screenshot to one of my partners. I'm like, he's like, stop man crushing on this guy. I really resonate with like everything that you just spoke about and that you do, and I'm incredibly inspired. So
thank you, Yitzi. Appreciate
thank you.
I appreciate you reaching out and supporting what we're doing. And if there's any way we could support you as you build your own authentic, real thing yourself, like we're here rooting for you, and I'm very grateful to be on your show.
I appreciate that very much. Tell me, since the majority of the content on the podcast is crypto related, it's not exclusive, but and since you had the opportunity early on to work with some crypto companies, I guess more on the IP side, what are your thoughts generally, like on crypto, on decentralized finance, on I guess like on the artistic side, on NFTs that are maybe less popular today, but still I think are a very good use case for how like the arts and tech could merge.
Yeah. I was just on Cubs's podcast, the Adjacent Pod, a couple weeks ago, last week or so, and it's also a very crypto adjacent kind of pod, and it's very interesting to me that I get asked to come on these, because I've done a bunch in the crypto space.
I guess like the LinkedIn algorithm just like puts crypto taglines you and pushes it.
But I know why. I mean, it makes sense, but it's interesting because I think I think one cool thing about like whether you call it Web3 or the metaverse or blockchain or crypto, whatever you do, this whole new world, what I love about it is everybody comes to it from such different directions, because you can't say that you're like crypto native, because you're not, right? Nobody really is, unless you're my kids who are 13 and 7, maybe them. But it's like, I think blockchain is a very powerful technology. I think we've got a lot of clients, building on chain. I think in the art world, for things like provenance and authenticity, I think in fashion for authenticity and to battle counterfeits. I think, collectibles, all these areas, like I think blockchain, with fintech, I think blockchain can be extremely valuable and helpful to solve, frankly, age-old problems, right? So believer in blockchain, 100%. Crypto, I'll be honest with you. I think Bitcoin is obviously an asset on its own. And that to me, obviously, I think is, maybe at this point, if you asked me 5 years ago, maybe I have a different answer. At this point, maybe falls as the exception to what I'm about to say. But I do believe that I still fall in that camp of somebody who is not completely convinced that there's a need and there will be a mass buy-in on eliminating sort of fiat currency, right? And so that's the only part of me that just does wonder long
No, they
term.
don't have to be mutually exclusive.
I know, of course,
It
yeah,
doesn't have to come as like a complete
100%,
replacement of fiat, but I
100%.
think there's already like a huge place for it, and like I personally think that it'll continue to grow in its predominance in the financial sector. Maybe not immediately replace fiat, but
Totally. But where I see with
it,
Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin, from what I'm seeing, just feels to me, it does feel like a little bit of like a digital gold, right? And I do think that will it ever be something with like the buying power as the U.S. dollar? Maybe, it's certainly a possibility if you look at what's happened in the last 5 years. So I guess maybe I'm a little bit more neutral on that part of it, just
mhm.
open, but not maybe fully bought in, if that makes sense. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
on the NFT part of it, on the digital asset part of it, I think that what crypto and blockchain have done for digital art literally cannot be overstated. Like, you now see, I mean, if you just see like Sotheby's just had a blockbuster and successful sale of all AI art a few weeks ago, even though everybody in sort of the art community was suspect of it right before it went out. We're working with a few digital artists who all create on chain, who are having very successful auction results, 6 figures, some 7 figures at the big
Wow.
sales in Asia. So like, it definitely opened our minds and our eyes, and maybe our souls to digital art, which I think is awesome. And that's fantastic. And I think a lot of credit has to be given to the crypto community and the blockchain community for making it sort of more in the mainstream. And so I think in the future, it won't necessarily, maybe we're already there. It won't necessarily be like, oh, I'm buying an NFT. It's just like, I'm buying art, and this piece of digital art is on chain. This piece of digital art is not on chain, right? And so to me, whether it's a non-fungible token or just a digital image, like, to me, that's just like, that's like saying, well, do you like paintings or do you like sculpture? It's like, well,
Interesting. Okay, well, I mean, that is insane in and of itself. I mean, the fact that we're at that point, because I remember when I first heard about NFTs, I think it was in the context of like NBA Top Shot. I was like, why the heck would anybody pay money for this? Like,
yeah.
it's literally just a JPEG. But obviously, as I fell deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, and bought into Bored Ape Yacht Club and other
Mhm.
projects, I realized that like this is huge. I think for me, interestingly enough, like I was intrigued by the um, creative IP aspect of it, like what the Bored Ape Yacht Club did with IP ownership,
Mhm.
how like it added like a new layer that I don't think we've ever seen before in art. I thought that was like very, very, very cool.
Yeah, I would say yes, but I would also say and no. I think it was
Okay.
very. I do think that a lot of people thought that what Bored Ape and CryptoPunks were doing had like sort of never been done before type thing, and I don't think it's necessarily that. I just think it's the first time a lot of people got introduced to like fine art.
Okay.
You know, because I don't know, like, you could go all the way back.
When else were you able to commercialize the art that you purchased?
Well, you're saying, so you're saying the fact that
I'm saying the fact that I could buy this ape and then like build out an entire
yeah, how
brand
they
and
gave
use the
the
IP
rights.
of the ape
Yeah,
as like,
yeah,
I think that was
yeah.
like
So I'll
so
give you that.
cool, both in that I could acquire the IP for my own commercial use, and the fact that by using it commercially and by adding value to it, I was adding value to the collection as a whole.
True. I think, I agree. I agree that that is unique for sure. That aspect of it is unique in that you don't see like Warhol or Keith Haring or anybody giving people like you and I like a license to go make a Keith Haring restaurant or something, right?
Right?
Um, but I think I don't know whether people like you and I should have the right to like alter art, or whether that actually adds to the conversation.
That's a whole other question and a
Maybe,
phenomenal one.
yeah, maybe it does. Maybe it does. But I agree with you. Listen, I think I'll say this, and I know we're probably running out of time here, but like, I think that at the end of the day, right, when you look back at history, whether you're looking at like medieval times, the Renaissance period, like the constitutional period, like the Roaring 20s, the 50s, the 60s, the 80s, whatever it is, all those eras that I just spent when I was saying them, you were probably had images in your head. And those images are almost always going to be the art of the time, whether it's music, painting, caveman sculptures, clothing, the songs of the time, the whatever, it's the art, right? At the end of the day, it's always just IP. That's how powerful it is. It's like our collective memory is like defined by IP, you know? And so I do think when people look back and think of the pandemic, right? I think that specifically the crypto, the punks and the Bored Apes are going to have a place in that history, right? Maybe along with like a Rafiq Anadol or somebody like
Absolutely.
that, Tyler Hobbs, like people like that. So I think that to me is what's like, I do think that it was a cultural moment for sure. I think that like this whole community that I think you're probably part of has done, has really moved mountains for digital artists, which I think is fantastic, because that's just like another sort of mode of expression, which I think it's really great that we have.
Vivek, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I really enjoyed our conversation. One last plug before you go, I did a phenomenal digital course that you put on, Blank Space, IP Law through the lens of Taylor Swift's career. Highly recommend to all of our listeners. It was just like a lot of fun and like really, really, really well made, and just generally all your video content that you put out. I just think it's so fun and easy to consume. So highly recommend to all of our listeners to follow you on YouTube and on LinkedIn for some phenomenal content, and get your hands on the Blank Space course.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Take care, man.
All right. See ya.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.